I recall the summer of 1991. I went to visit my parents, and my mom and dad excitedly showed me a picture of a graveyard and of their headstones. And they told me with a great deal of excitement, they said, you know, we've purchased our plots in Williamsfield, Illinois, and this is where we're going to be buried. And we've gone ahead and had the headstones, and they're all engraved, and you just need to put the concluding dates in there. And I remember being angry with them. I had, at that time, 16 years in the Army. I had experienced combat in Nicaragua and El Salvador. I had just returned from Desert Shield, Desert Storm with war in Iraq. And I had seen far too many graveyards and attended too many bloody funerals to think that this was I didn't want to talk about it. I said, I don't want to talk about this. I've seen too much death, and my belief was my parents were invincible, and they would always be there. And I didn't understand their perspective. 2003, my father dies. I'm deployed. It takes a while to get the news to me. I finally get home, and I find my older sister and my mother in the normal grief, but completely paralyzed by the grief that they felt. And so I found myself writing the obituary. I found myself trying to soothe my mother. At the time, I was a one-star. I asked my mother, do you want me to get out of the Army so I can be here for you, with you? And she said no. And I spent 3 weeks with her trying to sort through what we believed my father would have wanted, because we never had that hard discussion. We never talked about, gee, when you die, what are your wishes? What are your desires? Knowing that all the families are struggling with this emotion of, gee, I want to do what they would have wanted, but you know, we never talked about it. And you've added that anxiety and that difficulty in decision-making when it wasn't necessarily to be there. And I remember after 3 weeks with my mother, she looked at me as I prepared to leave, and she goes, you know, son, you're pretty good company. And she goes, but let me tell you what my fear was. My fear was my son, the general, was going to tell me how to live my life, was going to order me of how I would proceed. I go, Mama, I'm here to facilitate, to support how you want to live your life. But I didn't understand her perspective. So 2010 comes along. My mother had continued to live by herself for that period, and she finally calls me and goes, son, I want to come live with you. So I'm a 3-star at the time. I bring her to the home where I was living on the naval base in Norfolk. And my son, who's now 42, he was out of the house, but I had the blessing of a daughter who at this point in time was 5 years old. So all of a sudden, I got an 85-year-old woman and a 5-year-old daughter and they expend all their impressive levels of energy trying to compete for my wife Shelley's attention. I mean, I'd come home and feel like I needed to be a referee as I watched these two female entities argue with each other. So a year goes by, and I'm notified that I will be going to Afghanistan. And I will be going for 2 years. And so my wife Shelley goes, I can't deal with the competition of your mother and your daughter, knowing that every day there may be a phone call or a limousine that says, you're gone. So I moved my mother into an assisted living facility, understanding that her perspective was her mother had died in a state-run facility, penniless and alone. And so her perspective was, if you went to a nursing home, the state was going to take all your belongings to pay for the nursing home, and then you were going to be there amongst strangers. And I realized that. Fortunately, my son stepped up because my older sister wouldn't. I contacted my older sister. I said, hey, it's your turn. I'm going off to 2 years and more. I don't know if I'm coming back. I need you to watch after Mom the way I have for the last year. And her comment was, I don't want anything to do with that woman. So my son, God bless him, said, Dad, I got it. And I moved my mother into an assisted living facility that was a couple blocks away from where my son lives. And when I dropped my mother off at that facility, she said, son, you're leaving me here to die. Because that was her frame of reference. That was her perspective. And she died there. Beginning of my second year in Afghanistan, why my mother died while I was in Afghanistan. So to me, and I look at what I do here now and how many times I get the phone call that goes, hey, my mom, my dad, my aunt, my uncle, they just died. They were in the military, they never really talked much about it. Can you help me understand, are there burial benefits? Can you help me get them to a certain cemetery? Are there surviving spouse, surviving children benefits? Yes, yes, yes. Yeah, I do that all the time. Globally, I do that. Thanks to the unparalleled support of this incredible university and President McPhee, that I serve families and veterans with whatever questions, whatever needs they have. And so if you're a veteran or you're a brat or you're a spouse of the military and you have questions or you need assistance with VA benefits or anything else, I'm your action officer. You reach out and grab me by the throat and shake me like a rag doll. I would recommend you not let go of me, though. Because if I'm still breathing, I may be prone to moments of violence, but I am here to serve you. So when I look at mature realities, as I stand here at the tender age of 71, I think as we chronologically mature, hopefully part of that is an emotional maturity. But what I tell my veterans, particularly the ones in my age category of 70 and 80-year-olds, is you've got a responsibility to have those hard, realistic discussions, to talk about what the plan is. You know, as you look at what we fear, I mean, what do we fear? We fear, especially as we age, of being alone, of those changing opportunities as to what we're physically and emotionally capable of doing. And so how do you work with that fear? First of all, you can't discount it. You shouldn't ignore it. You should say, okay, I got this fear. And then you should have that candid discussion with yourself and go, okay, what am I afraid of? I mean, what is the real fear? When I went to Special Forces Combat Diver School, and you think about what most people fear when they enter the water, two things they fear. Hey, I'm going to drown, or I'm going to get eaten by something. Okay, so scuba school is wonderful. They immediately, instantaneously address your first fear. They put you in the pool and they drowned you. And so they loan you that 18-pound weight belt, and you put that cricker around, and they let you start in the shallow end to sort of build up the suspense, and you're there in the shallow end, and you sink down and take up a good squat position and push off, and then pull your arms with the intent of, I'm going to break the surface of the water, and I'm going to take a bite of air, and then I'm going to sink back down. And then you run along the bottom, and you get into deeper water, and at some point in time, you do not break the surface of the water to grab that mouthful of air. And even though H2O's got an oxygen molecule in it, it's really hard to separate that critter out without gills. So you eventually end up lying on the bottom of the pool and you lose consciousness. And then they grab a hold of you and pull you up to the side of the pool and revive you and go get back into the water. And some people don't want to do that, so they quit. So how do we face the reality that regardless of our positive attitude, at some point in time, we're going to die? And do we focus on that and feel sorry for ourselves? Or do we go, my sense of purpose is to continue to provide for my family and to have a plan during their time of grief? When I came back from 2 years in Afghanistan, as I tried to reintegrate myself into my family, I went through 4 major surgeries which kept me bedridden. So not only am I trying to reintroduce myself to my family after a 2-year absence, but now I feel absolutely worthless because I can't even get out of bed because my wife and daughter have to physically care for me. And so you feel that you're a burden. That fear that we all have that, gee, I'm going to run out of money, or I'm going to run out of health, or I'm going to be a burden to my family. I'm not going to be able to do things. And my suggestion for your consideration is it's necessary, it's healthy, it's appropriate, it's required to have that discussion with your family, to come up with a plan that you can discuss, a plan that they can use as a start point. Don't you dare leave your family with the requirement to sort it out or make a decision once you're gone. I mean, they may have a party as my family will, but the majority of normal people are going to go, hey, I'm in this moment of grief. Why did you leave me with other decisions? When my father died, I was amazed that my mother was so mad. And she said, he promised he'd never leave me. I was supposed to die first. And there wasn't any plan for when my father died. And I had never discussed it with him. And so that to me is part of the reality of maturing, is that you in a responsible, candid, loving, respectful fashion pull together your family and go, here's a plan for your consideration once I'm gone. And I thank you for your attention.